It's two conscious guys talking, where conscious male leaders come together and have a discussion that is deep, that is nourishing, that allows us to see the illumination of consciousness that's unfolding progressively for men that are waking up in the world, and where you can get insights on your own awakening as a man, and also for amazing women that want to learn more about men's challenges and struggles that have created some of the dysfunction we've seen within men in its society, often called, quote unquote, the patriarchy and other terms. What created it? What is the genesis of it all? What can we do about it today to empower men to be all that they're meant to be and to support the awakening of consciousness for men and women and all? Hey, David, good to be with you today.
Great to be with you, Daniel.
All right. All right. So I'm just so grateful that our paths have crossed, and I get introduced to you and our mutual connection. And, we just talked once so far, but I just really appreciate what you're doing in the world. You're helping entrepreneurs to realize who they really are and to come from that soul-centered place and be the love that they are. And like it's so beautiful. It's definitely up my alley of what I share and teach as well. So it really lights me up to be with you today. So I really appreciate you.
Yeah, likewise, man. I really appreciate the work that you're doing as well.
Thank you. So yes, what's happening for you as a guy lately? You hitting the gym like all right.
Yeah, I guess you could say so. Yeah, I definitely have started exercising a lot more recently, more than I did in the past. I used to be a yoga teacher back when I was in my 20s, and that was always something really huge for me. And then over the course of being married and having kids, almost any kind of exercise fell by the wayside for a really long time. What I always try to do every day is at least like a 5 to 10 minute yoga practice every morning. But recently I started taking my kids rock climbing and indoor rock climbing at a gym not too far from where we are. And I started to realize, oh man, strenuous exercise makes a huge difference in life when the blood really gets flowing and the stress gets relieved. Like it just was a totally different state. And so once I started realizing that if I do that more often, I'm going to feel better, I'm going to be operating at a higher state, I started to incorporate a little bit of light weightlifting and some cardio into my morning routine.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's one of the things I'm getting into talking about because I love talking about those things and exploring what us guys are doing. And so yeah, like for me, I was telling you I played tennis yesterday, and yesterday, like when I played the tennis, like it was amazing. It's been months, and I felt so good because we're playing outside and the sun's out, and oh my God, playing with a good friend, and it's like through the roof because it's sort of strenuous for sure for me because I'm not used to it. I'm not playing regularly, and then it's just fun. It's something I really love to do. It's just a great state, right? And then my energy was just really strong afterwards. Now later at night, I started getting tired, and then I told you like I kept pushing last night, and then I didn't get the greatest night of sleep. And I'm like, oh, I'm kind of tired today though. But yeah, I mean, taking that time and then going to the gym, doing the working on those muscles and everything. And, that's always kind of an experiment I'm doing. Like, okay, what's the right thing? I've kind of stumbled into what works well for me right now, which some people would say is BS, but I just do like one set of all the different things, like I do one set, but I do it almost to my absolute maximum. Like for me, if I go to absolute maximum, I'll break down my body because I can push beyond what most people do. Like I'll keep going. I'll be like, no, there's more in there, bro. And I end up something breaks down in my body. So I have to kind of modulate that. And but yeah, the practices, the meditation, throughout the day, like the meditations, the prayers, the everything that sets our energy right, and I think is huge. And one of the reasons why I bring it up on this particular series in this show extra is those are all the things that help with mental health. I
Yeah.
mean, just exercise, eating well, doing these things can flip your mental health states, like
Yeah.
in themselves, even, right? I mean, I always love like what Olstein or whatever, is it David or is it, I don't know, what's his first name? Joel. Joel
Yeah,
Olstein.
Joel, yeah.
Yeah, and he talks about it may not be the pancakes, or it may not be the demons getting, it might be the pancakes, is what he says. So, and, and so I think there's a lot to that. And I don't eat like a perfect diet, or whatever whatever that is, but I eat pretty well and more minimally on average. And so yeah, I mean, all these things are contributing factors. So I appreciate you sharing about this. Yeah, hey, some strenuous activity actually is productive and good for me, and I'm glad I'm embracing that now.
Yeah, no, I can definitely resonate with that. It's made a huge difference for me, and it's definitely going to be part of my regimen moving forward.
Absolutely. So you've had a journey of, you're in this doing this beautiful work and helping people in these extraordinary, wonderful, miraculous ways, and uh and but you've had this journey you told me briefly about. Like, we had like a 15-minute conversation. You're great. You got this background with storytelling and everything, so you told it really well and fast, and like it was really cool. But like, yeah, tell us a little bit more about your background. Like, I know it hasn't been always like this soul center journey, right? It was more like the usual go acquire, conquer almost kind of energy. It seemed like a little bit, it was that was in there, achieve, at least like achieve, and push. It's what it sounded like when I heard your story. And then and we hopefully it brings us to our knees in this lifetime and we wake up, right? I know, like, that definitely happened for me. So so tell us a little bit about your journey with
Yeah.
what obstacles you ran into, and with mental health, etc., along the
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, absolutely. So for this story, I think it actually helps to take it a little bit further back.
Hmm.
I grew up in a tiny town called Lackawanna Flintridge,
Hmm.
very affluent. My family was not affluent, but we happened to live in a very affluent town. My father worked at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory for NASA, and so that's nearby where near the town where we were living.
Hmm.
My parents divorced when I was 12 years old, excuse me, when I was 9 years old. And for a really long time, I did not realize the impact that that had on my life. I grew up thinking that I wasn't really affected by it, but we'll get back to that later. Besides that, I had what I thought was a pretty normal life. I grew up with my father, single parent household with my older sister, and my sister and I were really, I guess you could call us high achievers in high school. But we were just following kind of what was expected of us. In other words, we're supposed to do really well in school, get really high scores on the SAT, go to a good college, get a degree, and then you know that was as far as life had planned for us, and that was as far as basically the script went for us. So we did all of that. I did all of that. But what I found was that throughout my entire high school and college, I felt very lost. And I experienced a lot of depression. And I didn't know why, because outwardly things seemed to be going really, really well. But I didn't feel that way internally because I wasn't finding a lot of meaning in what I was doing. I wasn't really at the time following my own inner guidance. I was following a set of outward expectations. I was following what I thought that I was supposed to do instead of what I actually wanted to do. But I had no idea because I was so out of touch with myself. What I didn't realize at the time was that I was actually still carrying a lot of heartbreak from that divorce, and that I was actually carrying a lot of trauma from the time previous to that divorce, a lot of emotional trauma, a lot of transgenerational trauma from my entire family history. And so all of these things had completely disconnected me from myself, from my intuition, from my soul, even from physically, just being in tune with my bodily feelings. Like really remember as a kid, um, I would just, if I felt hungry, I would just ignore it. I just wouldn't pay attention to it at all. Like I wasn't really in tune to the signals that my own body or my own emotions were sending me. And this kind of climax my sophomore year of college, when my friends and we started smoking massive amounts of marijuana. But we were doing it as an escape. Yeah. And of course we weren't finding any fulfillment in that. And we weren't finding any fulfillment in what we were doing at school. We were studying film, my three best friends and I, very high achievers there. So we made we really loved what we did. We were very creative. We got a lot of positive feedback, but none of this was really nourishing that part of us that needed nourishing. So my sophomore year, this hit a climax where I realized, okay, we need to do something different. And so that summer, we decided to take a road trip across the country. And we went all the way to New York, my two best friends and I, and then they went back. One stayed in New York where he lived, and the other one went back to California. And that left me completely by myself at 20 years old to drive all the way from New York back to California. And for 20-year-old David, this was a terrifying proposition. I had never done anything like that by myself before. And we'd had a great time going east, but we were making all the decisions together. Now I had to decide everything by myself. And so I decided that I was going to just visit some friends locally around New Hampshire, around Vermont. And then there was a moment where I was driving through the Green Mountains of Vermont. And I remember in that moment feeling the weight of all these expectations, that I had to go back to school, that I had to finish my degree, that I had to get a job, that I had to figure things out, because I had felt like I had nothing in my life figured out at that time, which is kind of natural for a 20-year-old. But at that time, it really felt like this pressure that was building up inside of me, that somehow I was supposed to have these answers. But nobody had these answers. Nobody was able to give me these answers. I didn't know where to look for these answers. And in that moment, when I was driving across the country, in that moment when I was driving through that mountain range, I suddenly had a clear epiphany. And I realized that I didn't have to do anything, that I didn't actually have to do any of these things. I actually didn't have to go back to school. I didn't have to get a degree. I didn't have to get a job. These things were important, and I could see that they had value, but this relationship that I'd had to them, the obligation that I felt that I had to them, the fact that I thought I have to do these things because if I don't, well, I don't know what'll happen. But I've never even questioned that, right? That this has never even been a part of the conversation. It's always been, that's the expectation. That's what I'm going to do. That's what my father expects of me. That's what my peers expect of me. That's what the system expects of me. This is what everybody expects of me. But I don't actually have to do these things. And as long as I'm willing to live with the consequences of my decisions, I can actually do anything that I want. And the moment that I had this realization, all that weight completely lifted off of my shoulders. And then I started to feel something that I had not felt before, which was an inner voice and an inner feeling. And I realized in that moment, this is my guide. This is where answers come from. And it wasn't suddenly like all the answers came and I knew exactly what I needed to do. But what I realized in that moment is if I just follow that feeling moment to moment and step by step, this is what's going to guide me for the rest of my life. And so this is what started this journey for me. At the time, I was an atheist. At the time, no spirituality whatsoever in my life. Everything was logic, rational. My dad was a scientist, right? And so realizing that there was something inside myself started this journey. And so um, I actually decided not to go back to school at that time. I took a year off, and I turned that trip into an experiment of what happens if I follow my feelings instead of doing what I think I have to do or going where I think I should go. What if I just start following this intuitive feeling and letting this guide me? And so that's how the entire trip west ended up being. And it was miraculous. Like the kinds of things, the synchronicities that happened, the people that I met. That's a story for another time. Um, but this was the start of my journey into discovering how can I live from a
Mhm.
centered place. And looking back, actually, I wasn't very centered at the time, right? But it was just starting to crack and
Yeah.
open that door. Um, and so, like interesting things happened. So, for example, I was in Montana and I was at a bookstore and I picked up a book on Zen Buddhism. And so that became my constant companion for the rest of the trip. And at some point I realized in the jacket that the author or the editor was affiliated with a monastery in the West Coast. And so again, this feeling, right, of what if I follow that? What if I go to this
Mhm.
place? And so that's what started my spiritual journey. I ended up spending 6 months at this Zen Buddhist monastery. Um, the interesting thing was that um, so this was just the start of the journey, right? This realization that I have the intuition and all this stuff. It's not like suddenly that tied a bow over the rest of my life and now everything was smooth after that, right? This was what started the process of opening up to this inner world of spirituality, to these discoveries and these insights and these awakenings that I started to have. But what came with all of that, right, was everything that had been emotionally buried as well. So after I spent the 6 months at the Zen Buddhist monastery, I came back home to Southern California, was not yet ready to go back to school, and was really lost and confused again, because yes, I know I need to follow this intuition, but where is this going to take me? What am I going to do? And like I'm still feeling lost in my life. Yeah. Um, and I entered into a very, very, very profound depression at that point. I call that my gray zone because I remember driving around LA from point A to point B, wherever I had to go, whether it was to work or Aikido, which I was doing at that time, and just feeling like I barely have the energy to even hold myself up. Like my arms are just moving the steering wheel, but I don't have the will to do this. Like I was really losing the will to live at that
Mhm.
point.
Mhm.
Um, and I remember it got so bad that I felt like I can't even push the gas pedal down further than this. And I felt like I can't go on like this. I can't continue like this, right? Um, and it was around that time that I had a rock climbing buddy. Actually, this is when I started rock climbing. Was in my 20s, and he told me about an intensive psychotherapy workshop that he had been through. It was called Daybreak. It's actually still going on in Southern California. It's an incredible program. But I went to this workshop, and he had been through it. His entire family had been through it, and his dad was my mom's boyfriend at the time, and I loved them. We had a very close relationship, so I can see, okay, I trust them. So I went to this workshop, and that was the first time where I was able to get in touch with pain that I had been carrying since I was a child that I did not know was even there.
Mhm.
I had, as a child, experienced such a degree of emotional pain, right? Um, just through having parents who themselves had experienced even more emotional pain and trauma at the hands of their parents,
Mm.
that of course they didn't want to pass any of that on. They loved my sister and I dearly, but when you've got that level of woundedness that you're not looking at, and actually you're actively trying to escape or suppress, then there's no escaping and there's no suppressing it. It's coming out in different ways, and it's gonna hurt other people. And
Mhm.
so that's what happened. It was at such a young age. I was such a young, sensitive soul, that I could not stand that level of emotional pain, that feeling of separation, the feelings of rejection, the feelings of judgment that came. And so I shut it all down, right? If I'm gonna survive, if I'm gonna live in this world that's so painful, the only way that I can do it is if I close off my feeling. I cannot be open. If I'm going to close off to this feeling that hurts so much, I have to close off to all feelings. I can't let anything in, right? Because otherwise I might get hurt again. So
Mm.
boom, my heart went shut, right? And whatever abilities that I had to be in touch with the spiritual realm, right, is just too much. Boom, that closed down too, right? I'm feeling in this constant state of anxiety and fear, and I cannot stand this. So boom, everything just shuts down.
Mhm.
And so now this is how I'm living my life, in this constant shutdown state, but not even realizing it because this happened at such a young age, right? Like as a baby, as a 2, 3, 4 year old, as a 5 year old, that I don't even realize. And it's automatic, these things. Like I never consciously made these decisions. Most of us don't consciously make these decisions. They just kick in, they just happen.
Right.
And so I don't even realize that I'm living my life completely shut down to my emotions, to my feelings, and to life itself. And so this workshop was just the very first time that I um, tapped into that pain and realized that it was there and was able to release enough of it to feel, holy shit, there's so much life inside of me. There's so much energy flowing inside of me. And
Mm.
this was a catalyst for my spiritual awakening at the time, because during this event, I started to feel energy flow through me in a way that I never had. And again, uh, I was atheist. I'm now becoming open to Buddhism, right, from a very secular point of view. But now there's all this energy flowing through me during this workshop, and it starts flowing out of me, and it starts flowing through my hands and to the other participants during the climax of their work. And I'm just sitting there going, what the fuck is going on?
Mhm.
What is this? Nobody ever told me that this was even possible. And
Mhm.
this opened the door to the next chapter of my life, which is to figure out, what is that energy? This was clearly a healing energy.
Mhm.
And there was a part of me that just knew I'm meant to be a healer. I'm meant to help other people somehow with this, but how and where? And so this started this chapter of my journey where I'm trying to figure out, where can I find people that have these answers. And I think maybe that part of the journey we'll probably be talking about on in your other podcast. But what's important here is that this leads me down a certain path, and it leads me eventually to yoga, and it leads me to meet a master in India who he's the one who helped me finally find these answers that I
Mhm.
was looking for, and not by giving me the answers, but by opening my own ability to discover these answers. But where I'm going to is that while I'm there, I meet my wife, and in India. She's from Austria. And so at this point, I've been studying with this master for 2 years, right? I've had all kinds of insights, all kinds of awakenings. Before that, I'd studied all kinds of other forms of spirituality. So spirituality clearly became the center of my life. Discovering how to become a healer became the center of my life, right? Opening my heart, all these things. So I had all these principles, right, that I knew I wanted to live by. Now I'm married, right?
Mhm.
Almost immediately we have a child on the way. And this is where my struggle really started.
The parenthood, forget about it, right?
Exact parenthood and marriage.
Yeah, yeah, both. A double whammy. It's easy to be connected, when you're up in the mountains kind of thing. Now you did a lot more than that, but yeah. Okay, I've got it all settled. Now it's the next thing to integrate or to deal with, right? With wonderful things, but they create new challenges, right? So yeah, that's amazing. Let's get into that in a second. I want to back up. I
Sure.
want to get into that piece. Let's back up for a second and talk about that journey you just talked about. It's amazing. It's like the sense of just the way it sounded like, yeah, I was just so shut down basically from everything that happened, all the energy coming at me when I was a kid from my parents and probably other things too, but like it's all this energy and just like, okay, I guess I can't be who I am. I think that happens to so many of us or all of us, maybe to some degree in this kind of culture often anyway, many of us. So and then yeah, that whole journey and of like started like that breakthrough, you get in a connected place, those mountains, and all of a sudden it starts dropping in and it's like and then you're guided to spiritual connection and to do the work that you talked about. So but yeah, there's that experience people have on the spiritual path where you've got the breakthrough where you're connected with the essence of who you are and all that, but then you got you know as I mean, I'm just saying this for the audience and for us just to talk about, but like then the emotional body, right? And the emotional body is like, yeah, we know we're source, but what the hell, what about me, and then we have that to address and work through. And then it's like, man, I'm feeling good. I got this nailed. And now you attracted the right person in your life to marry and everything. And it's like, and oh, whoa, 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 whoa. Our new next spiritual teacher, right? And then children, yeah, the whole nother level of spiritual, you know, um, journey there as well, like, just even when they're little, right? Like, maybe you lose a lot of sleep, you got to keep up with them and they challenge you and whatever. And then you're wanting to you still have patterns inside you probably that um from the past, right? So you don't want to be like your parents, and then you got that challenge. And it's pretty phenomenal. But I just wanted to kind of recap your journey for a second based on what I heard. And like, this is an amazing, I just like, hey, this is an amazing story. This is where we are in the scene in case somebody fast forwarded to this point. Here we are. And definitely I'll speak later, but like I could definitely relate to that journey
Mm,
of just feeling like I can't be me.
yeah.
Like I experienced that. I will mention that real briefly, but like, yeah, I experienced that. And like I could be very exuberant and boisterous with my energy at times. And then when I saw people laughing and acting like it's too much, like it's happened many times in my life, but it started when I was young. And then I was like, maybe I'm standing out in a way it's not good, or I'd use my special connections and abilities in different ways, and then I would notice like other people aren't doing this, and I'm like, oh, it must be wrong, stop it, shut it down. And like so many different things where people didn't necessarily always tell me it was wrong, or that wasn't even what they're trying to convey, but my sensitivity and the way I was perceiving it was like shut it down. And then I went through depression, I went through all this anxiety, and got into psychology and all my paths and stuff to finally find more of that wholeness and everything. But yeah, so I mean, I think a lot of people can sort of relate to your journey, and definitely this part you're getting into now. So oh, this is great. This is great. So yeah, I just want to interrupt because sometimes it's just good to like take a second and take a pause. People can be like, whoa, this is an amazing thing. And like what the things you learned. And I also wonder, like in talking about that, was constantly curious about, again, as a boy, as a man, or whatever, growing up, were there other specific ideas that were given to you that, well, as a guy, or as a whatever, you ought to be like this, you ought to be like that, and how that might have impacted you too. And then we'll fast forward to,
Yeah,
fatherhood and
yeah,
stuff.
absolutely. I mean, so there were a lot of unspoken things,
Mm-hmm.
right? Yeah, my father was a wonderful man. I mean, just really when I look back on what a gift I had in him, right? Um, and my mother also, right? I mean, they're just incredible souls, right? Um, there was never I was never taught explicitly this is what it means to be a man,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I'm being shaped, number one, by how my father is, right? And just implicitly from birth onwards, that's manhood. That's the only example that I have a man as a man for the first 3 to 5 years of my life, right? So of course, there's just everything in me is just imprinting. I'm just imprinting that this is what it means to be a man. This is how men operate. This is how men talk. And it wasn't until years later in the healing journey that I realized, oh, that's why I struggled so much with my emotions, because my father struggled with his emotions. My father was not allowed to experience his emotions as a child. I was not allowed to experience my emotions as a child. Emotions were not okay, right? At least big, strong emotions. And
Mm-hmm.
this was something that this is one of those things that got buried inside of myself, that as a child, right, especially as a sensitive child, I am feeling a lot, right? I'm feeling everything around me, right? And I specifically was very empathic, right? I have a very sensitive heart. Some people are more or less to some degree, but my heart was very open. I was very open to feeling what other people felt. I still am to this day, but I didn't know it for the longest time. But as a child, feeling what other people feel, right? And feeling the disharmony that they're feeling internally, and feeling the disharmony between them, between my mother and father, right? That eventually leads to the divorce. It's too much. So what do I do as a small child when it feels too much? I act out, right? But when I act out, I'm acting out these emotions. I'm expressing my emotions. I'm sharing how I'm feeling. I'm not talking how I'm feeling. I'm not saying, hey, I feel uncomfortable. I feel hurt by all these things. I'm just simply acting out. But
Mm-hmm.
then how do my parents respond? Right? With discipline, right? With disappointment, with expectation that I should be a different way. And so these are all the things that imprinted in me, right? That, oh, okay, emotions, not okay. Got to bury them, right? If you feel anything negative, if you behave out of line, none of this is okay, right? So you've just got to focus on whatever it is that you're being told to focus on, right? Schoolwork, whatever it is, right? Housework, like, chores, all these things. Those are the things that you focus on. You don't pay attention to emotions,
Right.
right? You
Quit with
don't.
that, David. Get back to work. Do your chores. That kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. All these kinds of things, right? And so all of this gets buried. So this is my father, right? Like that's how he operates. Any emotion, and this is, of course, what eventually leads to the divorce. There's no ability to deal with the actual emotional core of what the conflict is, right? There's no ability to access that feeling center inside of himself so he can feel in himself and in his wife what's actually going on. And so that's how I grow up, right? That's my model of what manhood is. You don't open up to feelings. You don't touch feelings. That's a dangerous, dark place, and you don't go there, right?
Wow, that's insane for someone who's such a strong, empathic person, sensitive person. Yeah, all that big stuff you feel, shut that down. Like,
Yeah, exactly,
break down,
exactly,
right? Yeah.
exactly.
Mhm.
And so, all these realizations, they come later, because the reason why they come, right, is because marriage and parenthood was I don't know what words to use. They were, I mean, they brought a lot of love, right? The core of the love was there,
Mm.
right? But they brought everything out to the surface because there was a difference in, if I'm not in a relationship, then I'm just dealing with me, right? But the moment I'm in a relationship, now somebody else is dealing with me.
Right.
Right, and I'm dealing with somebody else, and so
Right.
now there's friction, and this is something that my that our spiritual teacher loved to talk about. He said friction is necessary in life. Friction is a necessary part of the spiritual journey because friction is what basically moves things along. And
Mhm.
so this friction that started to to uh to be created between my wife and my first daughter, my first child and I, uh that friction, that conflict, right? That's what brought things to the surface. But I mean, like abstractly, that sounds like, oh, go, yeah, that sounds nice. Like you had friction and it helped realize things. Like, no, that was the most difficult period of my life,
Yeah.
right? That
Mm.
friction that exists between the people that you love the most, the people to whom you want to connect the most, the person to whom I chose to spend the rest of my life with, right? We felt this incredible heart connection when,
Well, I wanted to just ask you a question about that. Yeah, we'll get into that.
yeah, absolutely.
Just want to ask a question because I think like I experienced that in a way too, with getting married. It's like it was the usual. In some ways, it looked like the usual sort of stuff. I want the house warmer. She wants it cooler, right? Like things like that. Like literally, like for some people, it wasn't this bad for us. Those things can become like death matches.
Yeah.
Okay, I will kill you if you turn that thermostat down or up, right, or whatever it is. And literally, it can get that bad. And it's like these power struggles, and
Yeah.
you know, uh, but some people say, well, if you're not getting along, maybe you shouldn't have got married, and it's not working out. And people look at the lens of relationships that way sometimes, and I never have. I just, I mean, in my adult life, I'm like, there's something here to work on. There's
Yeah.
something to move through and to lean into that. And I wanted to just mention that because I think a lot of people are, I just want to give attention to that because that myth is out there. Like, oh yeah, because most people tell you like they've been always in bliss and their marriages are usually lying. Usually they're just that's for public consumption and it's not the reality. And I can just tell you after doing. I'm a therapist, is my background, and I've worked with so many people, right? And you probably know this too, but like, yeah, as you find out more about what's really going on, it is not that way at all. Those same people I talk to again, like but that's what they put out there. So I just want to put that out there, guys. Yeah, relationships are work,
Yeah.
and we want to commit to that, even if it's the most difficult thing ever. So I just wanted to interject that as you're talking about that.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. That's absolutely the case. And it's interesting that you use the word power struggle,
Mm.
because that's exactly what it felt like, right? And what happened a lot is these power struggles over seemingly tiny things over time were poisoning our marriage,
Hmm.
right? They were closing our heart to each other because it wasn't about the things themselves, right? It wasn't about how she put the dishes in the dishwasher, right? And how much that irritated me because I felt like there was a better way to do it, right? Or how, uh, disorganized she was in this way, or how irritated she would get when, I would do things a certain way, right?
Hmm.
It was, why are we getting so irritated about these things to begin with, right? Why are these small things such a big deal? Because, a big spiritual concept is just let go,
Hmm.
just surrender, right?
Hmm.
What's keeping us from doing that? And it goes back to, as a little kid, all these unmet needs that we had as a child, right? All those times where we felt powerless as a child, all those times where we felt like we were made to feel like we weren't okay, or we were told there's a certain way to do things.
Hmm.
And if you want approval and if you want love, then you have to be aligned with those things. And now you're living with a person who does not live by that same code of expectations, right?
Hmm.
That was implicitly drilled into you, or into us by our parents. And now it's like, wait a minute, this is a threat. This is dangerous, right? So there's actually a ton of small child emotion that is being triggered by all these seemingly little things, right? Both the child that feels hurt and also the part of us that thinks it has to be a certain way. And now all these parts of us that we've been carrying since childhood are now bearing down on the relationship,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they're coming from our side, and then they're coming from our spouse's side.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where you have that's where you have death matches, right? And death match is also a good term because as a child, these things really felt like existential threats.
Mm-hmm.
If we did not do things a certain way, we would not receive our parents' love,
Yeah.
right? Or they would, they would shut down, or they would be physically or emotionally abusive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever it is. So to a child, there's really an existential threat element. And so this feeling of existential threat is coming up and out in the relationship, um, over all these tiny things. So, but there's no awareness of it, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't be coming up. At least there's not initial awareness of them. And that's how it was between my wife and I for years. For years, there was no awareness, right? That this is what we were doing. And even when we realized, okay, we're treating each other this way, we don't want to treat each other this way, we're committing to trying to make things different, we're still not unlocking the core of what was going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we go through that for a really long time. My daughter is born. She's been, growing up in the midst of that. She starts having hard times. She starts having emotional outbursts. We start to struggle with her. We don't yet have the tools or the awareness, right? And so now there's a new dynamic that becomes incredibly difficult in our life, right? And in my life, which is now there's as she starts to develop a will,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now I start to see a side of myself that I had never seen before, which is a level of anger and impatience that starts to come up in my family life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is where I start to realize, like, um, not immediately, but over years, like, wait a minute, I am behaving in ways that I never envisioned myself behaving. I always imagined that I was going to be the most loving husband possible. I always imagined that I was going to be a doting father, that I was just going to be there for my kids in every way that my parents were. What is happening? This is not who I thought I was. And all of this is in here, and much of it feels like it's out of my control. And
Mm-hmm.
that's how it was until it really reached a climax. About maybe 10, no, not 10 years of marriage at that point, 7 or 8 years, 7 or 8 years into our marriage and into our daughter's life, um, was where am I? Who am I? You know, all these spiritual things that I learned, that I've
Yeah.
struggled to apply and live by. What is happening? Right? Uh, and and it really, like, I could see my relationships, my closest relationships, they were crumbling. Yeah. My wife and I, we could not stay open to each other. My daughter was just really struggling emotionally
Mm-hmm.
with all of this. And that's when the real work started, right? All this spiritual stuff that I'd done before, right? Um, I mean, I haven't gotten into it at all, but I mean, I had real miraculous experiences, real awakenings, like profound experiences, the kind I'd only read about.
Whatever. Yeah. All this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like all that stuff. It's like, wait a minute, that's not enough, right? Um, because there's these layers of emotion,
Mm-hmm.
there's these layers of pain, and there are these layers of fear that I've been carrying that I have to deal with. And so that's when I started, um, I guess, the other kind of inner work. That's when I started to work with a therapist, with somatic therapy. That's when I started to work. And for people who aren't fully aware of what somatic therapy is, right, as opposed to talk therapy, somatic therapy is really, the concept is all these emotions are stored in your body, right? And they're stored in different places in your body. And so you somatize them. Like there's different experiences that you have. There's different feelings or contractions or illnesses that you might contract in different areas of your body. If you get in touch with those areas of your body, you get in touch with a suppressed emotion. So I
Mm-hmm.
started to work with a somatic therapist to actually feel the emotions that had been there since childhood, to actually open up to them,
Mm-hmm.
right? I started to work with all kinds of health nutritionists, right? All kinds of supplements that, because I started to realize like, oh, um, my biochemistry is out of balance, right?
Mm-hmm.
My neurochemistry is out of balance, and it makes sense, right? Of course, if I was wired as a child to live in a state of chronic anxiety and fear, all the time fearing rejection,
Mm-hmm.
that's the way that my brain has been wired to this day. And so my brain is almost constantly sending out fear and stress hormones. In fact, this was one of the primary difficulties that I had as a spiritual student, was almost any single time that I had a profound connection and feeling of oneness, it was almost immediately followed by a terror that I was going to lose it.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's not
And
too uncommon though.
what's
that
that?
that one isn't that uncommon, but I hear
I,
what you're saying. Yeah.
I would imagine it's not, right? But now it's like, oh, of course, that comes from feeling as a child like I'm constantly at threat of losing my mother's love.
Yeah.
You know, if I do the slightest thing wrong, her
Mm-hmm.
heart is going to close and I'm going to lose all this goodness and all this. Like, if you can imagine a child and a mother just in a blissful, open-hearted relationship, like that's heaven on earth for a child,
Yeah.
right? And then to lose that, to feel like the heart of the mother closes or she rejects or judges, then you have the opposite. It's the most painful thing that a soul can experience in a body as a child.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that they, having such a constant experience of that back and forth, back and forth, back and forth like that, it's like, okay, my brain is getting wired this way to expect. If there's going to be openness, the pain is going to follow not soon afterwards. So if you feel this spiritual experience, you're going to have this painful one that's
Mm-hmm.
going to follow not soon afterwards. So there's this constant expectation.
Yeah, like it's in your subconscious, right? You know this won't last. We've been here before in
Yeah.
other ways, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But so the point is that the brain actually wired itself in this way,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? My brain actually wired itself in this way. So it's like, oh, I got to help myself on a physiological level,
Mm-hmm.
right? There are supplements that I can take that are going to help balance out this neurochemistry and help me be in a calmer state, right? Exercise is going to help with this, right? Like there was a time where I bought a punching bag, and when I realized that I had this anger, I would tap deep into that anger and
Mm-hmm.
I would pound that punching bag from that place
Mm-hmm.
until I felt so much anger coming out through me and into that punching bag that once enough of that was out, I could feel the pain that was underneath that anger. What had initially caused me to feel so angry as a child to begin with, now I'm feeling the sadness.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm feeling the hurt. Now I can weep and
Mm-hmm.
feel that and let that go,
Mm-hmm.
right? um and so that's been the journey of the last 5 years, I would say, right? It's this journey. Like I went on this from a relatively young age, right, from 20 onward, on this spiritual journey, right? And then it's going on this emotional journey so that now I can integrate everything so that I can be embodied. So all these spiritual realizations aren't just realizations in my head. This spiritual energy, this soul energy, is actually flowing through my physical body, because before that it can't. If
Mm-hmm.
I'm carrying these emotional wounds,
Mm-hmm.
right, if I've got this wiring in my brain, it is actually preventing this spiritual energy from inhabiting this
Mm-hmm.
body. It's literally blocked
Right.
by my anxiety, by my anger, by my insecurities, and by my fear. And
Mm-hmm.
once I started to open up to all those things through all these different methods that I talked about, um, and most importantly, once I learned how to open my soul to these things,
Mhm.
right? Because that was the number one danger as a child, is
Mhm.
keeping my soul and my heart open to these emotions that felt overwhelming. Now, if I can keep my soul and heart open to whatever it is that I felt as a child, open up to it and experience it with my soul energy and be open to anything now. Now I'm finally starting to reach those states that spirituality talks about: peace, equanimity, open heartedness, right? Being able to see the light of God inside of other people,
Mhm.
right? And my relationships were the key to this, because my relationships were the constant reflection that you're not acting that way. You're acting in ways that are hurting. You're acting from a place of fear. You're acting from a place of anger. And this is causing pain in others.
Yeah.
This is actual causing damage to other people.
Right.
And
Right.
and when my wife would tell me that, and then that's when it's like, okay, I've got to take ownership of this, right?
Right.
My wife basically told me, like, I cannot continue this way. I
Right.
love you unconditionally, but if you continue to behave in these ways, then
Mhm.
we cannot continue together. Then it's just like, then I have to do whatever it takes, because I love her,
Yeah.
right? I love her so deeply, and I don't want to hurt. I never wanted to hurt
Right.
anybody, right? And it was all unconscious.
Right.
Even if it's happening unconsciously, I don't want that. And
Mm.
I am willing to do whatever it takes,
Mhm.
right? Uh, and then, of course, there's one of the most important things is asking for help,
Mhm.
asking, a higher resource, God, the universe, the divine, whatever you want to call it, however, people listening to this, you know, relate to that. It's basically, help me. I am ready to do this, and I need your help in
Right.
order to get past this. I want to look at these things. I know it's hard, but I'm willing to do it.
Mhm.
And then that's when the opportunities would present themselves. That's when a therapist would suddenly enter my life, right? That's when a supplement or a doctor or a person who would help me to move past these things. I still had to do it, and
Mhm.
it was really hard work,
Mhm.
but I had to ask. I had to surrender, and I
Yeah.
had to be humble enough to say, I'm struggling with this and I need help.
That's a really big one right there. Like there's a lot you shared. That's a really big one that I think, yeah, conscious guys or not conscious guys or whatever labels we put up, but like guys often struggle with. I mean, women do too sometimes, for sure, 100%. But like that whole thing of, you know, I'm a man, I could take care of my own business sort of vibe, like
Right.
I
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna do this on my own.
yeah, I can do it on my own. Um, yeah, that go it alone, lone wolf kind of energy, I think comes in more so for men. And, where women are more like, yeah, I need help, of course. And, the women on average, again, I don't want to stereotype entirely, but, it is true, guys.
Yes.
Yeah, it really is. For the ladies listening, the guys listening, let's just face it, it's true. And so this is not a strength necessarily. I mean, it can be have strength in it, but it's more of a weakness. I would say, if I were to judge it out, right, more of a weakness than a strength. Not being willing to ask help. How can we progress if we're not willing to ask help? I mean, from other people, from whatever you want to call it, source, the infinite spirit. Like that's where you started. You ask source, and then then the people start coming. Then you're like, okay, yes, I've been asking for this, thank God, and you're willing to accept it. Then so we have to be willing to accept help. This whole idea. I think people are too caught up on the idea of I don't need help. I don't need help. I don't need. Yeah, you don't need anything. You don't need to even be alive. I mean, I probably shouldn't say that on mental health series, but in a way, you don't need to be alive, but we want you to be alive. Stay with us. All right. You matter and it's important. So, you don't need anything. Okay. But what would be more helpful for you is to allow yourself to be helped, because you're right. It's so funny. I was just listening to Adi Shanti. Maybe you've heard of him.
I love him. Yeah.
Yeah, I was listening to him. He was talking about something I was listening to. And he was talking about war and division within and all this stuff. And he was talking about the power of our vibration, and like it's way more powerful, the ripple effect of our vibration, our state of being, than what people can possibly imagine. And then you're talking about it, like I always think that's so fun, the synchronicity of the messages, right? So it's like, so when we realize, like, wow, I mean, you know I need help, so that I can actually be a higher transmission of love to the people I love in my life. To think I can just do it by myself, well, that's just the part that's stuck still, often just trying to double down on I hate to say it, but like dumb, double down on dumb. Let's just keep trying the same thing, and it doesn't break through all the way. You might get some new results because you get committed, maybe, but then same patterns will take over because they're so strong. And so when you get help, though, it's a lot easier to move through that stuff. And why, don't double down on dumb, I guess is what I'm saying. It's just not smart. It's just not smart. So anyway, so yeah, that's really powerful. And I just want to say, because we need to wrap it up pretty soon, but I just love like how you're willing to just totally share yourself vulnerably, fully and completely on the show today, rather than what some people might do. And God bless all my guests. They're all great. But some guys too, they hold it back a little bit. They will share, but you didn't. You just like put it all out there. To this day, I'm still dealing with some of these things. If I'm being, and you didn't even say if I'm being honest, you just said it. You're just being totally transparent, basically. I mean, as far as I can tell, and just putting it out there. And I think that's so empowering for you and others. It's like, yeah, we are human. It isn't easy. We're not going to get to some, even Adye, like, quite frankly, I call him out. Like he said, oh, I've got to these ultimate states and they're abiding, and now I'm with no self and all this stuff. Yeah, but you still have emotion. I don't care. You can tell me that all you want. I can see the emotion in you. I can see, some of the issues that come up for you. I can just see, because I'm a reader, right? You are too. Like I can just read people. I can just be like, yeah, I know what you're talking about, but yeah, I can still see there's stuff in you. There's still things going on. I think if you're in a body, you still got stuff that's going on that challenges you. There is no completely ultimate state that's unalterable and you'll never leave it. Like, not exactly. Not exactly, anyway. It's not quite what people think. And that's why it seems so elusive, because everybody thinks, I'll just get to that state and I'll just stay there. For me, I mean, I know there's whatever states I could get into still, but I feel it's more like you just become to realize you're one with the one, and like you're always one with the one all the time, not just intellectually, but you sense, you feel it, you perceive it, you may not feel like you're living from it in a moment to moment basis, but like you're fully aware of it, at least. So I suppose there's all kind of different levels to it, but like some of it's just like, yeah, I'm enlightened because I accept my humanity too. I mean, like, rather than it, you're like in this high vibration state that you never leave, and you're like not human now, like kind of idea, like I've ascended, and that's all BS. That just creates more suffering, because then you just keep chasing something that's not even real. I mean, in my opinion. So
Well, you also keep pushing away something that that also keeps you. I mean, like whether you're chasing something or pushing something away, both of it is a form of rejection. If you're rejecting anything, you're not able to fully enter that state of oneness. And a part of that oneness, my interpretation of that is there is a part of us that is always with the oneness, unchanging, right? That's one with the universal light, however you want to say it, right? But that is also embodied in the world that is constantly in change, that is constantly shifting, and so it constantly in motion, so we're constantly going to be feeling emotions, we're constantly going to be having human experiences, and so it's both, it's not one or the other. We can't reject the human side in pursuit of this spiritual side. The human side is as much of a reflection, as much of an expression of that. And that's a big part of the work that we have to do, regardless of whether you're spiritual or not, is the whole human side has to be integrated. We have to be open to the entirety of our human experience. And that includes all of the emotions that we are either storing or feeling or are being exposed to in other people, and to be able to stay open and not to have to shut down, and to be able to feel that. If we can feel those things and feel the connection to the oneness, then that's when that beautiful dance of I guess enlightenment is happening, right? That beautiful dance of embodiment and life and spirit flowing through us into the world, I feel can only happen when we're fully open to our feelings, when our heart is completely open to ourselves and to others.
Yeah, we have to embrace our humanity, our foibles, our
Yes.
peculiarities. When we can even celebrate them, like we're really free then. Like, yeah, wow, I'm kind of crazy in this way or that way. Like, and just have fun with it rather than like trying to always fix yourself, like, well, no, we got to fix that too. And we're gonna get it all right one of these days. And like, no, that's an illusion. And it's like, yeah, of course, there's expansion, there's shifts, whatever, of course. But you're never gonna, this idea, like, yeah, and I always love to think of somebody said this once, I forget who, but like, yeah, let's get the world perfect, then let's freeze dry it, and then we'll just keep it just like that. It's like that's not going to happen with ourselves or the world. It's not like that. It's already perfect. And once you can sense and perceive that, that's part of what liberates you for sure. And you have to, yeah, dealing with the emotions, the energies as they come up, absolutely. And there's lots of ways of doing that. You've talked about somatic therapy, mentioned this daybreak thing, like there's all kinds of things, therapists, there's energy healers, there's all kinds of processes. There's no lack of people or resources available. If you're just, I think the basic guidance you gave was just ask for the help and look for it, and just see where you're guided. Follow that sense of guidance with that.
There's just one thing that I'd love to add to that is, like, once we have the intention that we want to change, the
Mm-hmm.
critical part of it is just not giving up,
Yeah.
because what will happen is, at least what happened to me, and it's happened to my wife and basically anybody that I know, we are constantly driven to the point where we feel like it's too much, where we feel like giving up, where it feels like it's not working, it's not changing, this therapist that I'm working with is not the right one. And the key is, if we have that goal, I'm not going to stop trying, no
Mm-hmm.
matter what, because this is the most important thing to me, to open up to this, to develop my relationship, to develop my potential to love, to develop my potential to be open-hearted towards the people that I love the most, to be there for them, right? As long as we don't give up, we are going to face those moments of hopelessness, we're going to face those moments of helplessness, right? That is going to happen. That is part of the, actually, maybe it won't happen for everybody, but it definitely happened for me. Right. But that's a part of it, because it's not just like, oh, we realize we have this guidance, we find a therapist, everything gets resolved, right?
Not like that. It's an ongoing thing. You're right. Because yeah, sometimes the people that can help us the most, we resist the most, right? Stay the hell away from me. You're the wrong one. I'm gonna pick another one, another relationship, another therapist, another, creative endeavor to do in my life or my business or whatever. Like, you're the wrong one. Now you're the wrong one. You're the wrong. Yeah, okay. Like, just watch the patterns, right? Like, maybe the ones that are coming that irritate you the most sometimes are the ones you need to pay attention to the most often. They are, so that's a good, and to stay with it, like you said, like, oh, everything's great, and then things get a little rocky, and then you just run out the door, or maybe you just run out of the door on emotions you don't want to feel,
Yeah.
and you need to feel those things and work through those things. So I've run into that in relationships again and again, right? And then when I ride it out and I keep communicating with that person and work with my own self, like it's so powerful, the strength of those relationships. Then when you get, as you keep moving through those things when they show up, because again, there's not necessarily an end point. okay, we've been doing great for a few months, and all of a sudden something erupts again, right? Ugh, you got stuff to do, and it's fine. And just look at it like cycles of nature, right? Like, yeah,
Exactly.
sometimes everything, the mountain's fine, all of a sudden there's an eruption, right? So why should it be any different with us? Yeah. So anyway, well, we need to kind of wrap it up. Do you have any last, well, first of all, where can people check you out? Like, you do incredible work to help people to live a soul-centered, life and have a great business to really grow their business and stuff too from that place. And so, yeah, if people do want to check you out, where can they go, first of all?
Yeah, so right now the best place to find me is at soulcenteredfounder.com. That's where I do work with entrepreneurs, helping them to create the biggest impact in their life possible by living a soul-centered life, by embodying all these things, help them through this process of creating a vision for where they want to go and all this stuff. So yeah, that's the best place, soulcenteredfounder.com.
Awesome. And any real quick last words of wisdom for everybody coming off our conversation today?
I mean, I would just say that this journey of life, of discovery, of experiencing all the basically the wonder that we have inside of ourselves, like it is the most blissful thing once we learn how to be open to the entire spectrum and not just to the positive side. If we can learn how to be open to what we call negative emotions and positive emotions, that's when we find bliss inside of everything.
Yay. All right. I love that. Love that. That's so awesome. So beautiful. So been great talking to you, David. I really appreciate you. I'm deeply honored and grateful for all you shared today.
Likewise, it's really been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening in to Just Two Conscious Guys Talking, where our mission is to impact millions of men ultimately to deepen their awakening by examining their consciousness of what's been unfolding for them with male stereotypes and programming that has allowed them to have opportunities to evolve during these times. It's an exciting time to bring more love to men and women around the world, and we are grateful for you tuning in today. Feel free to share this episode and keep tuning in, and also look in the show notes for a link to get notifications of future episodes. Until the next time, everyone, goodbye for now.